Hello and welcome to Ticker Climate. My name's Holly Stearns. It's great to have you tuning in every single Monday. On Ticker Climate, we tackle the climate crisis facing our planet, and then we examine what actions governments and also corporations need to be taking. Each week we speak with key movers and shakers in this space. Now, my co-host, Scott Hamilton, is a climate change and energy expert. Scott is an author, researcher and policy advisor with a mission to tackle the big issues and accelerate climate change action. Scott, great to have you on every single week.
Hello, Holly. Great to be here again.
Now, let's get right into it. Last week we spoke of drought and heat waves sweeping right across North America. Now it's Canada's turn, sadly. What's going on with this extreme weather?
Yes, Holly, so this is really serious. So what we've seen is that heat wave can continue to head north, and now we've had Canada experience its worst ever temperatures. So there's a small town, Leeton, which has got about 250 people, and that's experienced temperatures of about 50 degrees Celsius. Now that is huge. Now this is not in the middle of the desert sort of town in Death Valley, California, or the places we were talking about last week. This is in areas that's generally cold, like they're generally experiencing temperatures of about 25 degrees. So this is really bad, and we've not only seen people dying from heat wave, but also seeing mass fires there.
I mean, Scott, what's the answer here? Things are only going to get worse if we don't start to take serious action, right?
Yes, Holly, it really is. And this is really, the scientists are really saying that we need to be taking action quicker to address climate change, to keep things as close to 1.5 degree warming as possible. And that's what the discussion is going to be this year at the COP26. But the other thing that's really important with what's going on at the moment is that this is breaking all the worst case scenarios for the climate models. So these sort of heat domes that they're talking about, which is still unclear exactly what's going on, but this is beyond what we thought was the worst case for climate change.
It's incredible. I mean, on the other scale as well, we've also, in the other part of the world, we're also seeing extreme records in Antarctica. What do we know there?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little while ago, and the potential impact on the major glaciers, such as the Thwaites Glacier. But we had the UN confirm last week of the 18 degrees, which doesn't sound much, but if it's in Antarctica, that's not good at all. And what that is really saying is that we're seeing the temperatures that are really confirming our worst fears in terms of climate change, but more importantly, the need for the world to be taking strong action. And that's again what we're hoping to see this year as all the countries, including Australia, ramps up their action on climate change. And that's not 2050, Holly. That's talking about 2030. It's a here and now problem.
Scott, I've got to ask you, what do you think we'll see in regards to Australia's targets when it does come to that meeting?
Look, I am not thinking it's going to be good, Holly. I think that we've seen the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, trying to inch towards a 2050 target, and he can't even get there. And now with Barnaby back, and we spoke about that last week, I think that really means that he's not going to be able to even put a weak target of 2050, let alone a decent target, which is in the order of 50% by 2030. But you also need strong action to go with it. Now, we're nowhere near that, and I don't think we're going to get there by this November when COP26 occurs.
And it's not until you see like that vision that we just had on the screen just before of California burning like that, it's not until you're presented with a situation like that people really are experiencing the extremity of this. It's so serious. Now, we also have the UN report ranking nations on sustainable development goals. Now, I'm actually afraid to ask you, but how did Australia go?
Yeah, look, this is another race that we're certainly not winning in terms of doing well on. So this was the climate action goal. So there's a number of different goals that the UN ranks the various countries on. And so they ranked 166 countries on climate action, and Australia came dead last. Now that's just hugely embarrassing. So not even in the bottom half, we're dead last. It's sort of about as good as we've been doing with the vaccine rollout, Holly.
We also, you mentioned before as well, we've had Barnaby Joyce back as Deputy PM last week, but not all of the Nats are happy about this. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on this topic for us?
Yeah, so this is fascinating. So a bit like the Labor Party that's got the extreme sort of right of Joel Fitzgibbons, that there's clearly the extreme rump of the National Party, and now Barnaby's part of that and he's taken power. But Darren Chester, who got knocked off, that was widely regarded as a good minister by both sides, has come out and said that the National Party needs to get with this century, that they need to forget the 1950s, they need to be thinking about climate change seriously. And the other thing that happened, Holly, was we saw the Victorian Nationals, Peter Walsh and Steph Ryan, come out and say that if the federal National Party is going as right-wing as they are, then they're going to think about the Victorian Nats are going to separate from their federal counterparts, because they really acknowledge that climate change is hurting farmers, and farmers want action on climate change because they know what it's doing to their farms and their crops.
Yeah, indeed. So, did you see this move coming, or did this take you by surprise?
I'm really pleased that what we've seen with the Vic Nats coming out and strongly saying, and I saw Steph Ryan say the other day that she's really wanting to see strong action on climate change because that's what's needed. And I think that's a refreshing thing. And if we can see more of that across all the parties, I think we're all going to be much better off.
There was also a leaked report about Exxon and lobbying against climate action. Tell us what this is all about.
Yeah, so we remember the big tobacco back in the years used to lobby against any action to stop us smoking, and it didn't cause cancer, and we had all those big heavies in terms of big tobacco making those pronouncements that it wasn't a problem. Well, this is a leaked report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the scientists, which are saying that they're really worried about the impact that big oil, in this case Exxon, is having in terms of stopping governments taking action. So by putting out the disinformation, by muddying the waters, it's really stopping governments taking action. I suppose that's what we've seen a bit here in Australia with the coal lobby and the fossil gas lobby stopping the federal government taking action and actually putting more money into fossil gas and more money into coal. So it's really amazing that this has happened again, and we all remember the Exxon Valdez, the oil spill from back, I think, 30 years ago, which devastated a lot of the environment there, and it looks like they're in trouble again, Holly.
Indeed, and while we're talking about big oil, what this doomsday event in the Gulf of Mexico, let's talk about that. We've also got some footage to show you exactly what's happened, but talk to us about that, Scott, as well.
Yes, Holly, I was really amazed. So I was typing a report the other day, and I felt really strange typing that the ocean is on fire. Now, this is not caused by climate change, but this is what causes climate change. So the extraction of fossil fuels and the oil that comes from those wells is what's contributing to climate change. Now, I just think this is amazing, and it's actually amazing that there's actually been a number of these sorts of things occur in the same period. I think this is about the third freak event that we've seen in the last little while. I hope it stops at 3, Holly.
Indeed. I mean, how likely are we to see this stuff to occur again?
Look, I really don't know, Holly. I think that it's a bit of a function of that Mother Nature tends to cause problems across the world, and when you've got large amounts of fossil fuels in particular places and you're extracting more and more, whether it be on ships or in oil rigs or wherever it is, there's always a risk of these things happening. So I would say that we're much better off to go to cleaner fuels like wind and solar power, where there's not as much risk of these sorts of events happening anyway.
Now, the European Commission, Scott, has drafted plans to set a tax rate for polluting aviation fuels. What do we know here?
Yeah, so this is again a move. We've talked about the carbon border adjustment mechanisms a few times, Holly, which is really the European Union saying we need to really be careful with what is the carbon footprint of the various products that we're importing. And for a long while, they've actually been exempting aviation fuels. They've been saying that if the plane's using fossil fuels, well, you won't have to pay a tax on that because that's just okay, there's no other choice. But now they're saying, no, hang on a minute, we're going to be starting to make sure that there's a levy or a tax on the aviation fuel that is using. Now, this has still got a little way to go, but it is a real sign that the exemption of tax on the fossil fuels in terms of flight is not consistent with the UN's position on climate change, which is why they're changing it. Now, I actually hope that it'll mean that we'll see some new power fuels, some more electric planes and other things come into play, which I think would be a terrific outcome.
Yeah, just on that, what do you think the likeliness is of us seeing something like an electric plane?
Look, I actually think that it's not far off. In fact, I saw a couple of prototypes in the news in recent times. And I do think that we are seeing the advances happening. And there's one thing that we know, that when the incentive's there, that our scientists and engineers come up with ways to get and beat these problems. So I do think we'll see zero emission plane flights sooner than we think.
Yeah, cool. Scott, now I've got to talk to you about this. You also published an article with Stuart Kells at Melbourne University talking about a lesson on water markets for the USA. Tell us about it.
Yes, Holly. So this was actually looking at water, and which is impacted by climate change. And we know that California's been going through severe drought in the last little while. And we've seen farmers pulling out almond trees and towns not having enough water to actually drink. Now, there's lots of similarities between California and here in the Murray-Darling Basin. So this article's really saying, well, when you're looking at the water market, don't follow what we're doing here, because it's been an epic fail, is what we're saying. That what we allowed was the water to become a commodity for traders from overseas, whether they be in China or the USA or Wall Street or Singapore, to actually play in our water market. And that means it's not going to its best possible use, it's going to where the most money is being made. So don't follow us, is what we're saying in that respect. But yeah, it was actually a really great story. We got to mention the Chinatown movie, which is a classic, by the way.
It is. I actually can't say it is because I haven't seen it, but you tell me it is. Now you've got a book coming out as well. Tell us about your book, Scott.
Yes, Holly. So in the end of next month, on the 31st of August, Stuart Kells and myself will be, our book will be published. It'll be available in all good bookstores. It is called Sold Down the River, and it's about how Wall Street traders and robber barons cornered Australia's water market, which is the sort of thing I was just talking about, and how it's really been ripping off the farmers and the other water users across the entire Murray-Darling Basin. It's really a tragic story, but it's a really important story. So we're really looking forward to having that out soon.
Absolutely. Finally, let's talk about electric vehicles and the recent New South Wales government announcement. Yeah,
this was a really good news story in the last week or so, Holly, that we saw both the Minister Keane as well as Minister Andrew Constance go out and announce that they'll be electrifying public transport, that they'll also be promoting electric vehicles, and that means we'll have more zero-emission vehicles on the roads in this part of the world, which we need to see more of, and it's really pleasing to see that occur. And I think that it's a bit of a message to the rest of the other states that they really need to be also pushing electric vehicles and other zero-emission vehicles more.
Indeed. And while we're talking about electric vehicles, our next episode next week will feature a VIP from Sweden, Scott, which we're super excited about. Now, I want to play some footage here of where they're from, the Volvo Group. Now, he's going to be joining us from Sweden. He's the head of environment and innovation for Volvo Trucks, which they work a lot in electric trucks, Scott. It's just amazing, and I can't wait to chat with him. I know you're excited about this as well.
Yes, this is going to be very exciting, Holly, and it's really important too.
Yeah, indeed. Now, that's all we have time for today on Ticker Climate, but I'm sure that we've covered all of the trending stories in the climate space this week. As always, Scott, great to have your company every single Monday. Until next time.
No worries, Holly. See you later.
The news stream never sleeps. As the sun rises above Melbourne, New York rings the final bell. Then Singapore comes online and Hong Kong's in play. The Middle East pushes for change and Europe makes its move.
We've got your ticket to the world right here.
Watch the world unfold with Adrian Franklin, journalist and first with breaking news. Market-moving perspectives on the stories shaping your day. TICKER News.